Right, good morning, good morning. While we're waiting on others, we're looking at the pedigree lesson in Canvas. Pedigree lesson. Read that page over, please. If you have not submitted your human variation face, please do so. I'll speak more on that when everybody's in. Because right now, I'm speaking to those who have already turned it in. All right, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. If you just came in, we are in Canvas looking at the unit on pedigree. And as soon as I wait another minute for anyone else to come in, if you haven't already done so, you should have turned in your human face activity. And I will speak on that in a minute. Give it one more minute for folks to come in. Hmm, there it goes. Computers are a wonderful thing. Alrighty, I think almost everybody's here. All right, if you just joined, we're in the unit for pedigree on Canvas. Take a few minutes to read that over. Pedigree, pedigree. All right. Um, oh my goodness, what happened here? Okay. My computer is doing an amazing thing at the moment. Don't know what it's doing. Okay, that's there. All right. Let me speak on the human face for a minute now that everybody's in. Because there's a couple of you who still haven't turned that in. With the human face, let me see if I can't pull that up and talk about that. And it might help with some of you as far as um, how it's being graded. But we're not, I'm just going over this. Um, okay, pulled it up. Let me share. Okay. So again, what you had to do was to flip a coin and designate one side heads and one heads could be male, tails could be female, and then you were supposed to select what type, the sex of the offspring. Then you were supposed to look at polygenic traits. Again, have two genes that dictate um, what that trait looks like. It's not just one allele, it's two that combine. And again, you get two from mom and two from dad. So that's why there's four of them there. Okay. So when you flip the coin, you were flipping so that you would get the two traits from mom, and then flip the coin again, the two traits that you're going to get from dad as far as the A is concerned. And then you're going to flip again for the B traits. Okay. So you had to flip that coin basically four times in order to get um, the genotype for hair color. So the first flip might have given you, and you might have just decided the first flip is heads. I mean, capital A, capital letters, heads, tails, recessive letters. So whatever you flipped, that's the letters you should have gotten. And we did the coin toss again because this is in nature. This is random. This is not something there were because with this exercise, and I'm not watching you, so you could have easily just circled which one you wanted to pick, but you did the coin toss so that you could understand variation and probability. Okay, so that's why we did that. So you did the same thing for eye color. You did a flip for the A trait, and then you did another pair of flips for the B traits, and then you circled your color. Skin color, again, you were supposed to flip one coin 10 times, and heads would have been, for each time it turned up heads, you would give it a point, so you weren't giving any points for tails. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, you would decide, depending on how many times you got heads, whether the child was a dark-skinned child or a light-skinned child. Okay, so you would have put your number down and then kind of gauged lightness or darkness from there. Okay, so with this, you really should have written your number down because when I see your picture I can't really tell what your skin color complexion should have been if you didn't answer. Let me know what the number was. All right. Then we had questions here. The polygenic traits, these three up here are the ones that have multiple alleles that control them. So they're the ones that would have been listed for question number one. And again, I explained why we did number two, why you flipped the coins, the number of times that you did, and how is it possible for a child to have a trait that neither of his parents have. And again, we talked about this is where we're looking at the person and we're saying they don't look like anybody in the family. And that's because the child could have received the parents offered up two recessive traits, a combination of recessive traits that weren't showing up in anybody else, but showed up in them. And again, probabilities. And then you were supposed to just define genotype and phenotype. All right. Then again, your coin toss. We're supposed to be, and for every trait, you did a coin toss so that you did a heads and tails again to pick whether it was a capital letter or a recessive letter. And depending on the two turns that you got, you would pick what the trait looked like. So if you got if your coins came up heads twice, then it was two capital R's. If it was heads and tails, then it was a capital R, recessive R. If it came up tails twice, then it was recessive. And then when you draw your picture, the face should have that thing. So what you needed to do was mark off this chart, whatever your results were, and then I can gauge whether you drew the face according to the traits that you chose. Here again, it's easy to just go by and check. These are the ones I want. But the idea of the exercise was really to look at probability. So that was for the coin toss. All right. So that being said, that's due after today's late, very late. Okay, so we want to look at Nearpod activities. I asked you all to look at your pedigree column of unit on in Canvas. All right, so let me send you this link so everybody can get in here. And we're going to watch, this is mostly a video, but you know, with Nearpod, it has questions. All right, so that's the Nearpod link in the chat. And I'm going to play it. All right, so I'll give you a minute to get in. All right, so with pedigree, we have a chart that we're going to learn how to read. This one is not so much that you fill in the boxes, but you have to learn how to read a pedigree chart. All right. All right, right now it tells me that only 3 people are logged in. So if everybody would please join the Nearpod. And then answer the questions. I'll click back in a minute to see who's. So if your name wasn't on the screen, and you got 1 minute, let's go. Everybody should have logged into the Nearpod. And now the question is, what do you already know about pedigree? Some of y'all might have dogs that have pedigree. What does that mean? Or maybe you even actually read the first paragraph on Canvas and the first thing you did was define what is pedigree. All right. Nothing, I'm assuming, Zell. Okay. All right. So Piper's heard of it. No answer, no answer. Okay. All right, we need to get some answers. Let's go. Okay, who we missing? Who we missing? Kashan, that's who we're missing. Kashan, are you with us? Please log into the Nearpod.
So I have a really awesome picture for you. Here it is. Oh, it might look like circles and squares to you, but make no mistake, this is no ordinary picture. This is a pedigree. A pedigree is like a family tree. It can show information about an inherited trait passed across generations. And this one is actually a small pedigree of us. Well, our human forms. See, that's me, my sister, my mom, my dad. I'm not arbitrarily picking random shapes to represent us either. In a pedigree, the circles represent females, squares represent males.
Okay, so let's answer this question. Maybe like that. Now, this is important because when you have to do your pedigree charts, your pedigree, and you have to be able to read your circles and squares. So it does matter. You have to understand, Kashan, where are you? All right, it does matter, so it's important. There you go. Please log into the Nearpod. All righty. So pedigree, the males are represented by, and B is the correct answer. Squares are males and circles are females. So if you said otherwise, take a minute to fix your answer. So we got one person, no answer. And then we got a couple of people that said circles and squares. So make sure that, again, that this is something that if you take notes, take note that the squares are male, circles are female.
One way you can remember that is the letter C for circle comes before the letter S for square in the alphabet. Alphabetically, the letter F for female comes before the letter M for male. I've got to think about letters of the alphabet, though. I realize that might not work for everyone. So, if we take a look at this pedigree, these Roman numerals represent generations. There's 2 generations here. This between my parents is called a marriage line. This line here connects parents to children, so you could see there are 2 children from this marriage. Now, you may wonder, why are some of these shapes shaded? What does that mean? Well, the shaded shapes represent a trait that is being tracked in the pedigree. Here are 2 important facts about the particular trait I am choosing to track. Fact number 1 about this trait being tracked is that it's recessive. Recall that in typical Mendelian inheritance, dominant alleles, if present, will lead to the expression of dominant traits. Recessive alleles only are expressed when the dominant allele is not present. Now, fact number 2 about this trait is that it is an autosomal recessive trait. Just a reminder that autosomal means a chromosome that is not a sex chromosome. In human body cells, there are 46 chromosomes. The first 44, 22 pairs, are autosomes. The last 2, 1 pair, are sex chromosomes.
Okay, in humans, the first 22 pairs are called what? And this is a vocabulary word. We need to know this. Okay, everybody answers. I think there's 2 people still not answered. One person still hasn't answered. But everybody who has answered is answering correctly. So the one person, Kashan, are you logged in yet? Because right now it's not going to tell me. All right, thank you. Okay. So autosome is the correct words. And again, those are your body, what they call the body chromosomes. And then you have the two that chromosomes that are characteristics for determining sex characteristics. All your traits that are maleness or femaleness are found on the X and Y chromosomes. All the other 22 talk about what else is going on in your body. Okay, so when we did the human face characters, all of those would be autosomes.
So this trait is not sex-linked since it is autosomal, and that means it does not need to be written as coefficients on the sex chromosomes. So what is the trait we're tracking? Attached earlobes. Yes, you might not realize it, but look around and you'll see that humans, they have free or attached earlobes. Although we want to point out that there may be more than just these two categories for earlobes. And while this example is used often in basic genetics, there's probably more to this than just one simple gene. For our example, let's assume a simple gene trait, and that free earlobes is dominant, meaning at least one dominant allele must be around. Attached earlobes is recessive, showing when no dominant allele is present. So if we were to put the genotypes next to each of these shapes, what would they be? Well, the shaded ones would be easy, because we just mentioned that attached earlobes is the trait we're tracking, and it's an autosomal recessive trait. So if we use the letter E, then these shaded shapes must be lowercase e. Any capital dominant letter, and the individual would have to have free earlobes and not be shaded. So let's look at individual 2 in the first generation. That's our father. He's not shaded, so he can't be little e. What about big E? Well, there's a problem. See his children? Us? Each child must get an allele from each parent. So if I received a little e from my mom, then I had to get the other little e from my dad. Therefore, he can't be big E, or he'd have no little e to give. His genotype must be the heterozygote genotype, big E, little e. He's what we call a carrier, though. He still has a phenotype of free earlobes because of that one capital, but he carries the lowercase allele. Now, that's just one tiny pedigree. Let's look at a big family reunion. Well, an imaginary one, because I have to confess I don't really know whether our relatives have free or attached earlobes. I thought about sending a survey to them, but it just felt a little awkward. So here we go. Big, giant, imaginary family of relatives. Okay, just to make sure you understand this, how many siblings does my dad have? Well, look, here's my dad in generation 2, number 4. He has 3 siblings, all brothers, right here. What is the phenotype of my paternal grandfather? Well, look, here's my dad. Here's my dad's dad. That would be my paternal grandfather. And because his square is shaded, that means his phenotype is attached earlobes. Okay, so let's go ahead and label all these shaded shapes with the genotype little e, since we know that's the trait we're tracking. Now take a look at generation 1, individual 1. That would be my paternal grandmother. What's her genotype? We know it's not little e, or her shape would be shaded. But if we went with big E, could that still work? Yes, all the offspring could get a big E from her and a little e from my grandfather. But what about big E? Would that work too? Yes, because the children could still get a big E from her and a little e from my grandfather. It may be less of a probability, but it's possible, and therefore we must list both, that she is a big E or big E, because we don't know. All the offspring of my paternal grandparents, though, they're going to have to be big E. Remember, they have to get an allele from each parent, and that means they're going to have to pick up that little e from my grandfather. They will be heterozygotes, and that's the only option here. Pause this video and try to solve the right side of this pedigree now. Ta-da! Imaginary family done. So how'd you do? Well, here are some of the tricky ones. Did you see that generation 1, individual 4, has to be a carrier only? Because if not, then the shaded individual children would not be able to get the little e that they have, because they have to get a little e from both parents. How about individual 9? This female married in, but that's not the reason that she can be either big E or big E. If you look at the children, they aren't shaded. So while they will have to get a little E from number 8, as that's all number 8 can give, the other capital letter can be obtained from number 9 regardless of whether she's big E or big E little e. Remember, one option may be more likely, but if it's possible, you need to include both. Now, remember how we made a big deal about how this was an autosomal pedigree? Well, what if you're dealing with a sex-linked trait and therefore a sex-linked pedigree? There are a lot of sex-linked recessive traits. Color blindness and some male patterns of baldness can be sex-linked. Let's
Okay, she just said this. Is color blindness a sex-linked trait? It's true. It's true. It is a sex-linked trait. Was you know that because the people who have males who have color blindness, they don't see the stoplight, so they depend on the lights, the position of the lights to determine whether it's a red light, green light, or yellow light. And then on Hollywood Squares the other day, they had one city that has reversed the lights. I'm suppose you have a visitor come to town who doesn't know that. That would be bad for a person who is colorblind because they depend on the lights being in a particular position. So this is true. It is sex-linked, it is
Let's
usually
pretend
male.
now that we're told this is a sex-linked recessive trait. I'm going to keep the old labeled pedigree here that showed an autosomal recessive trait just for comparison, but now here's a brand new sex-linked pedigree. First of all the females, the circles, should have an XX to indicate two X sex chromosomes by them. Remember, females have two X chromosomes. Males should have an XY to indicate an X and a Y sex chromosome. That's always a good thing to do first. Now remember that we were told this pedigree is tracking sex-linked recessive traits, so the shaded one here has the sex-linked recessive trait. A reminder from our sex-linked video about how this works. Let's use the letter R for an allele. Now recall that females that do not have the trait, they can be either this or this, and the heterozygote genotype, this, is a carrier. She doesn't have the trait herself because of the dominant allele, but she's carrying it. Only a female that is this will have the sex-linked recessive trait. So if I'm looking at this pedigree, what would the genotype for individual 1 in generation 1 be? Well, notice here she has 3 children, and one of her sons here is shaded. Where does her son get his Y sex chromosome from? The father. Where does he get his X sex chromosome from? His mother. Individual 1 doesn't have the trait, or she would be shaded, but she must be a carrier if her son received an X chromosome with a recessive allele on it. Now, what about individual 2 in generation 2? Well, she can be this, like her mother, but look, she could also be this, because it's possible to get one of those from each parent. If it's possible, you must include it. Now, pause the video and try the last female. How'd you do? Remember, the key here is to always check and make sure that when you look at a child, they have to be able to get one of their alleles from each parent. Now remember that both of these examples were recessive. It doesn't have to be that way. On our handout, you can try one that follows an autosomal dominant trait. If it's a dominant allele that you're tracking, remember it would only take one dominant allele for a person to have that trait. Another quick thing to point out is sometimes you will see pedigrees that are half shaded. Well, that's just awesome because they're basically letting you know that the half shaded ones are carriers. If I wanted to turn our first one into that half shading, then it would look like this. Mapping and understanding pedigrees is important, especially as we continue to make advancements.
Okay, in a pedigree chart, what does a half shaded square or circle indicate? And technically, I shouldn't leave this screen up because it tells you which one is correct and which one isn't. Okay, So that means they are a carrier of the trait. All right. And again, all of these, you're going to get a worksheet that you have to practice this. So I'm going to give you a chance to um, ask questions. I'm also going to do a poll question in a
Need to
minute.
make advancements in understanding how genetic disorders are inherited. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Okay, we don't have to answer that question. We're just going to come out of this. I'm going to come back over here. All right, so while I do attendance, if you would please continue looking at the pedigree lesson page, please. Okay, there you go. All right, so let's look at reading this, and then we're going to look at um, doing a chart for ourselves. So go over that, and then we're going to, um, this is a typical one that they do for hemophilia because it is a sex-linked um, trait that everybody does. All right, so read that page over. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute while I do attendance. Okay, everybody should be reading the pedigree page. All right, I want you to take a minute and touch your earlobe, or look at your earlobe, and I want to do a poll. She talked about the trait of attached earlobes. Okay, before you go, oh, he's already gone. Um, before you go, type in the chat whether you have an attached earlobe or a free hanging earlobe. Check your earlobe. Is it attached or free hanging? All right, we got it. Free, free, free. Malik, you answered the question, then you can do your errand. Attached, okay. Free. Ariana, free. Who we missing? We got, okay. One, two, Kashawn. Attached or free? Landon, attached or free? All right, so looking at, okay. Kashawn, what about you? There we go. All right. So, so would you say based on it, hopefully everybody can see all the results. Would you say based on, are we all carrying and mine is attached. Are we all, which one is the dominant one in this class, free or attached? Okay. Free is dominant in this class. Okay. And that's kind of how you do a survey. You just you look around the room and you see which characteristic is showing up the most. And again, this is a flip of the coin, the probability of this egg eating this sperm carrying this gene with that gene. As far as then again, you can go back and look at your parents. What do they have? Are you carrying the dominant trait or the recessive trait? Something that you can think about. As far as that's a autosomal trait, so it's only not worried about it being blended or co-dominant or any of that. Okay. We do have an activity to do. Let me share this. You might have to refresh your page in order to see it. Let me put it up here in student view to make sure that you can. Okay. All right, so look in your to-do list. It should be an assignment on your to-do list. So again, you might have to refresh your page to see it. And this is the worksheet that goes with the video. Okay, so let's look at this. It says consider a pedigree as tracking an autosomal trait. The two recessive traits are going to be a lowercase t as a result of the inability. So they're tracking in this particular one, the ability to taste a particular substance called PTC. The ability to taste it is recessive. And so you're going to determine it by writing, actually the ability to taste it is dominant. The inability to taste it is recessive. So you're going to, if you can't taste it, it's going to be two lowercase t's. If you can taste it, it's an uppercase T. So they want you to complete the box based on those characteristics. Okay, so if they are and they did the first row for you. So if it's going to be a male, and he has two capital T's, that's his genotype, he is a taster. And if you're drawing a chart, he's going to be a square. And because he doesn't have the recessive trait, we're not going to shade his box. Okay? And then finish filling out all the rest of the chart up here based on the genotypes that they've given you. Decide what their phenotype, are they a taster, non-taster? Are you going to draw a square or a circle? Are you going to shade it or not shade it? Okay. Then you want to you're going to do a cross with a couple who has the ability to taste it, have two grown sons, and one grown daughter. The sons have the ability to taste it, and the daughter is a non-taster. And she marries a man, and they have two sons. So basically, you're drawing three generations. And so they want you to draw that pedigree. So let's just work on that first page first. That's all we have time to do today, and we'll work on the second page on Wednesday. All right, so your challenge right now is to complete the top part. So we're not submitting it yet. So don't submit. Just do the top page, draw your diagram, and that's about all we have time for this morning. And then on Wednesday, we'll come back and look at it, and we'll look at the second page. Okay, everybody got that? We're only doing the first page. So you're completing the top chart, and that's going to be your, what do you call it, the key, guide key on how to, whether you're drawing squares or circles, are you shading them or not shading them? So your diagram should follow the key that you make at the top. And then when you finish your diagram, then you're going to answer question 17. Okay, don't worry about 18 and 19. Just answer question 17. So get as far as that. Okay? And then don't submit. Don't submit. Don't submit. Let me see if I can make sure. Can you replay the Nearpod? Or do I have to put it in student mode so that if you needed to see the video again? Or I'm just going to find a copy of it and I'm put it in the playlist. That's what I'll do. Don't worry about that. Forget the Nearpod. I will find a copy of it and put it in the playlist. Okay, so it's now on your playlist in on your YouTube playlist. Also, they're going to, I think starting next week on Wednesdays, they want us, being as your class is an end of course class, they want us to start using practice exams on Wednesdays. So I'll give you further information about that. But they're so we'll just have class days and then practice days on Wednesdays. Like I said, they just put that out there, and then I guess they're going to talk more about it today. And so I'll keep you abreast as to when we actually will start doing that. And then somebody in another class asked me, um, what happens if you fail the end of course test? I believe, because it's been a minute since I've been in a Georgia school, but when I was in Georgia schools before, you could pass the class and still fail the exam, and then you still have to pass the exam to graduate. So it's important to pass both. Was there anybody who had trouble downloading the worksheet? Again, download it, but don't submit it today. And let me know if you're having trouble drawing uh, your pedigree. If you pick a color to shade the box, don't shade it, make it gray so that you can still see what's in the box. If you have letters or other things in the box. All right, it's important that everybody practice this. Some of y'all are doing other things. All right, anybody have any questions? Anybody struggling with creating your pedigree chart? Again, don't submit this yet. I don't want you to submit until I'm only asking you to do the first page right now, but don't submit. Okay, if you have no questions for me, you are free to log out and see you on Wednesday.